Good evening. Welcome to Curiosity About Alchemy. I hope you're doing well wherever you are in the world. I wanted to just talk a little bit about. I spend the majority of my time here in the workshop, and so I have a lot of time to watch YouTube videos and other things. And so I'm constantly watching videos on alchemy, and some of them are really good. Some of them are really disappointing, but that's life. And the part that I find disappointing is that our society today has essentially completely written off alchemy in relationship to physical matter. And there's so many branches of alchemy. There's your spiritual application and your, medicinal applications and all these different things, and they are all legitimate. If you're working in the art of transforming things, whether it be yourself or cooking food, even is alchemy. But the art of alchemy in relationship to physical matter it's really got a bad rap, because there's been so many charlatans and so many people that had no real idea what they were talking about, that explained things, and also, there was such persecution back in the day in regards to alchemists, and their lives were threatened through multiple periods in history, and so they cloaked the language in order to save themselves, and that created a whole bunch of misinterpretations. And then you have this whole branch of people that misunderstood the allegories and took them literally, and were unsuccessful in the work, of course, as a result. And it created this opinion of, well, it's just not real. It's just a speculative theoretical thing, and the products of it are theoretical, and it just goes on and on. I'll be thoroughly enjoying somebody speaking on alchemy, and then they'll authoritatively declare somewhere through their speaking that alchemy has absolutely no relationship to chemistry, to physical matter, to all these things, and that it's merely a spiritual application. And I don't deny that is true, that alchemy has a spiritual application. But to categorically deny that alchemy applies to the physical world is, I believe, a misunderstanding. And I don't fault people for not believing. That's, everybody's in their own stage of alchemy in themselves, and so we each have our own stage of growth, and you have to respect and appreciate where a person is in their path. I just wanted to be one solitary voice out amongst the thousands of people that completely deny it categorically, who wants to put a seed in your soul and your spirit and your mind that maybe there's more going on than people realize. And the alchemists, they tell you to observe nature. And if you look at nature and you look at the elements and what modern science understands about the elements, they are all transforming, all of them. Like, they're becoming iron, they're being transformed constantly. All of them are. And the time frame they put on this transformation is immense. I mean, like, they say that for indium to decay into silver, or to capture a neutron and become, the next stage up after. If silver captures a neutron, it becomes indium, right? And if indium decays, it'll become silver. And so they say that this process of decay and neutron capture between indium and silver takes the lifetime of the universe to the fourth power for it to happen. But they don't deny that it happens. They just think it takes a really long time. And in those circumstances, it does. The misunderstanding comes in not seeing what's happening around us. If you observe the volcano, you will notice that there's a chemical process. There's chemical solutions happening in there. There's sulfuric acid, and there's salts, and there's sulfates, and there's all these minerals. And it's a chemical process going on in there. But also deep down, further down where it's hotter, it's a dry process going on between dry chemicals, because it's too hot for the water to stay around. It just evaporates and goes up to an area where it's not so hot. It makes pools. And so you have two different places where transformations are happening within the earth between the elements. And you have to think of, where does the magma come from? How did those elements get down there? And think of the Pacific Plate, for example, with the Pacific Ocean sitting on top of it. The ocean is constantly, it has tremendous amount of suspended metals in the salt. And there's also volcanoes in the salt, in the ocean, and they're erupting and they're belching out sulfuric acid and sulfurous acid and hydrogen sulfide gases and stuff. And if you take and you dissolve a metal and you want to take it out of suspension, then one of the ways you do that is to add sulfur to the solution, and it becomes a sulfate of whatever that metal is. And so you see these transformations happening in the ocean. But then even further, as the Pacific Plate, which is diving underneath the west coast of America, it's just kind of diving underneath of it, and the plate California is sitting on is right coming up because this other plate is diving underneath of it. And so what's happening is, you have to think of the floor of the ocean as a giant, huge conveyor belt of salt and minerals and nitrates. Like, every possible element is in the salt of the ocean. And the ocean becomes these huge deposits and layers on the ocean floor of minerals. Some of them are in salt form, chlorides, and some of them are have been sulfated by the volcanoes, and some of them are nitrated by the nitrogen. Because in the ocean, the mixture of gases present in the ocean are similar to what's in the air. So you have about an 80% nitrogen mixture mixed in the gases of the water itself, the ocean. And these free nitrates become digested by bacteria in what they call nitrogen fixation. And so those basically you end up with a mass of salts, nitrates, and sulfates coming from the ocean floor. And as the ocean floor dives down under the other plate, there's a point where those two plates are grinding up against each other, and it's like the high tension point. And that area is called the subjunction zone, and it's like 30 to 40 miles deep. And this conveyor belt of all these salts and sulfates and nitrates are being deposited into these volcanic chambers. And these chambers are filled with all the things that you find in a volcano, all the sulfurs and again, elements and minerals in different forms, because they're on the sulfur side of things instead of the salt side of things. And so salts are a high pH and sulfurs are a low pH. And when you put high pH things and low pH things together, you get a reaction. Like baking soda is high pH and vinegar is low pH, and when you put them together, there's a reaction. And things switch back and forth between them. Like some things move from the salt to the sulfur, and some things move from the sulfur to the salt. And there's an exchange that happens between the elements when these two separate bodies come together. And some of them are coming together in the deeper part where it's actually molten, and so there's a dry reaction happening between the dry salts and the dry molten materials and the elements that are mixed in there. And so they come together and they have their reactions in a similar way, but it's at a higher temperature. And then all the moisture from that lower chambers where it's too hot for the water to stick around, the water comes up as steam and it becomes stuck in these pockets that are just high enough that it's not boiling away anymore. It rests in these pools and pockets where the steam has condensed because the temperature dropped just enough to where it's not boiling off. And so you again have the same thing happening as is happening in the high temperature zone, except instead of a dry reaction, it's a wet reaction because there's water present. And the nitrates are volatile, and so they'll come up out of the salts, and they'll become hydrated in the waters, and so then you get nitrogen, and you get sulfurs, and you get all these other salts all coming together in solution. And this happens between 1,000 to 3,000 feet deep to get the temperature range where this happens, and it happens between 50 degrees Celsius and 400 degrees Celsius. And so in that range, as the lower chamber rises and falls, it has a slow kind of rise and fall as the pressure builds and reactions are happening in there. And sometimes air is like a volcano will go off, and some will go out, and it'll lower the level of the chamber, change the pressures. As that happens, it changes the temperature of the upper chambers. Like they'll gradually get hotter, and then they'll gradually get cooler, and then they'll gradually and as these chambers vent or gain pressure, it will determine how these complexes take shape. Because some things, if it's under pressure, it might become hydrated, whereas if it's not under pressure, the hydrogen can't stick around, and so it flies away, and if it'll leave behind the oxygen, and it'll make an oxide. And if it gets too hot, the oxygen goes away and it turns black. And so then you have the elements that are born in the black category, such as carbon or lead. And that's at the highest end of the temperature, like when you get up to 400 degrees. And so just below that, the oxygen is allowed to remain because the bond between the oxygen and the element is greater than the bond between the hydrogen. And so there's a threshold where the hydrogen starts to go away in stages. And then you reach a point where there's no more hydrogen left and it's just an oxide. And so this is what creates the different colors of gemstones and different things. Like something under pressure would create greens and blues, and when it starts to lose pressure, like when the volcano erupts and the pressure goes away, the hydrogen will go away too that's bound into the stone. And so that's the steam that comes out of the volcano because it grabs an oxygen on its way out. And so then the colors, the oxidized colors, you get orange and purple and red. Think of like iron oxide as that reddish color. And so in these chambers inside of the earth, we have many things happening. We have high pH solutions, and we have low pH solutions, and we have all these elements in different forms, salts and sulfates and nitrates and all the forms that elements take. And they're being combined in chemical reactions, and they're being reborn, essentially. And this process, because it's the same process that everything that has physical form was born in, we ourselves also reflect this process in our spiritual and emotional bodies, and how we operate, and how we think, in the cycles of life, of birth and death, and life, rebirth. And so I don't at all by any means say that any of these other branches of alchemy are not legit. They are completely legit, and they're necessary. What I'm trying to introduce is the thought that maybe, because we are made of matter, and this process applies to us in our spirit and body, and we ourselves are a reflection of nature. We are born of nature. We are composed of elements. We're a compound, right? And so the idea of applying the concept, like the rules, the pattern of alchemy to the chemical world, to the elemental world, what I find is that the laws of nature are universal in the animal and the vegetable and the mineral world. And so we, in our state of development as a society as a whole, have a fairly decent understanding of the animal world and the vegetable world. And because it's easy to observe those things. It's easy to watch an egg go through mitosis and multiply and become thousands and billions of cells. And it's easy to see a plant take nutrients out of the soil and produce alkaloids and all these other things. But when it comes to understanding the mineral world, modern science is kind of a little bit handicapped in that area, and it's lack of understanding. You know, they just don't understand, and the periodic table as they have it, like, things are declared, like the understanding of how the atom is born is a little bit outside of modern science's grasp right now. They're not even willing. I don't know. I'm not sure why they're so resistant to understanding that part of nature. Modern science and I've said it before, they're like a toddler. They run around the yard and they take everything apart because they want to know how it works. But at that stage, they have absolutely no idea how to put it back together so that it works again. They're just at the point of development where you're looking into it to see, to try and understand. And that understanding isn't there yet. And so the concept that elements are actually compounds is difficult for modern science to grasp because they don't understand how the compounds are put together. How is it born? What is it that they are born from? And what's the process that makes that happen? The same laws that apply to the biological world also apply to the mineral world. And that's where the misunderstanding is, because modern science doesn't see these elements as living in the same way that they see a biological thing as living, or an animal. Like, these elements are built of the same thing that we are, the same thing that everything else is made out of. And if those things are alive, then these things are alive too. And the concept that rocks are actually alive is harder to grasp. So you could look at it from the perspective, okay, it contains energy. And energy is a universal substance. Your life force energy is the same substance that makes a magnet, and that makes electricity. And that substance itself, energy, is the prima materia. It is the substance from which all things that have physical form originated from. Which means that if it has a physical form, then it's alive. And if it's alive, it can reproduce. Everything that's alive reproduces itself. That's just basic life. That's the drive of all things with life, is to reproduce, right? And the real downfall for alchemy is gold making. It really is, because people are so fixated on the idea of becoming endlessly wealthy and being able to make gold that they miss the point. They miss the whole point of alchemy. The point is understanding the laws and the operations of nature so that you can understand yourself, so that you can understand the source of everything. Where does life come from? Where does consciousness come from? Where does physical matter come from? They all are born from the same thing. And the gold making aspect of alchemy has blinded people to what's really going on, because it becomes this like fixation of gold, like gold. If you think of alchemy, well, you're trying to make gold, so you're an idiot, right? And I know that the common perspective out there in the world today is that if you believe in metallurgical alchemy, you are a fool. And that's okay for those people to believe that, because that's where they're at in their state of development. They're part of the cycle. That's where they're at. They have no ability to see. And there's nothing I can do about people and where they're at. Everybody's on their own path, and they have to deal with that. I have to deal with my own path, not theirs. And I live in a world that's a little bit different than their world, because the world that I live in is a world where nature will teach you how it happens, how things are born, the laws and the principles, the rules, the matters involved. If you are curious to understand and know how things work and why. But if you want to be an alchemist because you have gold fever and you think that the only point of alchemy is to make gold, then nature won't show you her secrets, because you're missing the point already. And if you were given that gift with that frame of mind, it would have a negative impact on the world. It really would. Like, that's where these, horrible people that run most of the world, some of those families started out with this, and then generationally they lost their direction and began to abuse the gift that had been given to them. Metallurgical alchemy isn't some weird science. It's merely the art of mimicking how nature works. And she's working in the belly of the earth, inside the chambers of the volcanoes, to make elements, all the elements, from carbon to gold. And the thing is mankind in general, not all, there's some really good people out there, but in general, human beings have a tendency to be extremely selfish, self-centered, and thoughtless in regards to their fellow man. And they almost always take these kinds of sciences and use them for destructive means. And the science of chrysopoeia, and it isn't just gold making, it's the science of nature. And so it's learning how elements themselves are born out of an invisible essence, brought into physical form, taken from the ethereal and brought into the physical. Which means that you're talking about the science of the atom. And if you can build an atom, gold is the least of the possibilities. Literally. Gold is the least of the things possible. Because once you understand how nature builds elements themselves, all elements are born through the same process. And so a person with ill intent, selfish ambition, and a lack of empathy for their fellow man could take that kind of knowledge and literally destroy the world, everything in it, in a very short period of time. And so that's one of the reasons that the philosophers were so secretive in their work and in the language that they used to describe their work to their associates that also did that same work. And so they developed a language between themselves so that they could share concepts and ideas without the uninitiated understanding. Alchemy isn't just the science of oneself. It is that, but not just that. It's also, it encompasses all of the transformations that happen in nature. All of nature, everything, all the transmutations, all the transformations that you see happening around you in all of nature, that's alchemy. It includes you, your mind, body, and spirit, and your emotional and spiritual health. But it's not just that. Gardening is alchemy. A gardener is closer to an alchemist than anybody because all elements are born from the same things, which means that the same food that I feed my tomatoes, I also would feed metal if I want the metal to grow. The alchemist is a gardener, and his garden is full of crystals instead of plants. And those crystals are just as alive as the plants. They are nurtured and fed by the same elements as the plants. We are surrounded by alchemy. Not only spiritual, but physical alchemy too. If you bake, if you make cakes and pies, you're an alchemist. You transform that grain of that wheat and that sugar and that fruit, whatever you may have put in your pie or your cake. You transform it and you remake it into a thing that has nutritional value. Something that will stimulate and carry the life force energy from those substances that you built together into your body. That is alchemy. Doctors and pharmacologists are alchemists. The ability to extract essences from a plant, take that essence and isolate the part of that essence that has the medicinal value, and then to appropriately apply it to a sick individual, that's alchemy. It's physical alchemy. And the science of nature, when applied to medicine, is the greatest benefit of all. Gold is irrelevant compared to medicine. The richest person on the entire planet would give up all of their wealth in a heartbeat for another 50 years of life. Medicine is what is invaluable. The fixation on the gold in alchemy, it's really actually disappointing. It's because the ability to build a gold atom is the gold itself isn't the exciting thing. It's the ability to build the atom that's the exciting thing. Because the ability to build any atom, makes the potential infinite, completely and utterly infinite, because now you're able to manipulate physical matter. But it's not magic, it's not conjuring, it's not any of these things. It's mimicking the natural process of nature. And when it's done in a controlled environment and done in a way where the matters involved are able to remain pure and uncontaminated, you can actually do that process in a more perfect way. You can fine-tune nature's process and use that. Like, you can take, like, one of the biggest problems with medicine today is that a lot of medicines have benefits, but they also have negative, like, many poisons are used as medicine, because in that situation, the toxic side effect of the product is lesser than whatever's happening with the person, which the toxin will help fix, right? And so you accept the side effects because the side effects aren't as bad as what you're going through now. And the doctors don't have any other options. But if you understood the science of nature and how atoms are built, then you would also understand yourself in a different way. And you would be able to take these substances and put them through the same process and make them compatible with your body in a different way, so that the medicinal qualities of the product were amplified and the toxic qualities were eliminated. Over and over and over again, the masters, they would say, the medicine is the most valuable aspect of alchemy, because the ability to take a potentially toxic substance and turn it into a beneficial medicine is, the applications are beyond comprehension. I mean, I could go on for hours, just the applications of that. Just one example would be opioids. Opioids are tremendously beneficial when used properly, but the negative side effects, the addictive factor, the life-destroying factor is really bad. And I've seen enough people be destroyed by that to, it's no joke. That stuff's really bad. But without it, we wouldn't be able to do a tremendous amount of the surgeries and life-saving procedures that we do, because you're able to numb the patient, do the work, and then the body doesn't go through the shock of being cut while being aware of it. And so you have to take, they balance the negatives, and they calculate, okay, well, the positive outweighs the negative, and so they use the product. And it has its purpose. But what if the product could be remade to no longer be addictive? I've been talking for a while, but I wanted to emphasize that it's a mistake to discount physical alchemy altogether. I don't in any way say that the other attributes of alchemy are not real. I totally believe that emotional and physical and spiritual alchemy, like the Carl Jung perspective on alchemy, is a completely, totally legit application of the work, because this is how all the atoms in your body were born, and so this is how your brain works, and it's how your body works, and it's how your mind controls the body, and so to balance these things out is an extremely important and vital stage of the work. But I also feel that to stop there is a mistake, and that as a result of us denying this whole understanding of nature, this whole aspect of nature we just are oblivious to, and that's the birth, understanding how physical matter is born. How is an atom born to begin with? What makes an atom become silver or gold or lead or carbon or what, all these other things? What causes the differentiation? And if you look at nature, you see with an egg, the egg is a single cell. And it's a single cell that hasn't been augmented yet. And so when the catalyst comes in, the catalyst will provide an augmentation factor. It will become either male or female, depending on the type of sperm, if the sperm is male or female. And so you have a single cell, and the catalyst is introduced to the single cell. And now the single cell starts to divide as it multiplies. And every time it divides and multiplies, it gets exponentially smaller. So you started out with one big cell, and now you have billions of little itty bitty cells. But when they first start developing, the cells don't have a specific direction. They call them stem cells. They could become anything at that point. They haven't been augmented to become a bone or a lung or a heart or a brain. But it starts out as a single cell that has the potential to be any of those things. And then, based on the circumstances involved, the catalyst used, the cell will become augmented. Certain cells will become designated brain cells, and other cells will be designated heart cells, and so on. Elements are the same way. You have a product that is born that is, it has the potential to be any of the elements, but it's none of the elements, and it's all of the elements at the same time. And then it becomes augmented by its circumstances. Temperature, pressure, or lack thereof, will augment the development, the shape. And in temperature, think of temperature as in equaling vibration, frequency, right? And so if you think of frequency as color, right? A certain frequency of light makes purple light, and another frequency of light makes yellow light, and another frequency of light makes blue light. And so frequency, vibration, and color are intertwined together, and they're thought of as separate, but they're all the same thing. It's the vibration, the frequency of the matter that creates that particular, whether it be ultraviolet or any orange, any of the other colors. And so when the cell is in its first stage, its T cell stage of development, and hasn't been augmented yet, something, whether it be temperature, and a really good example of that is the turtle egg, the sea turtles. The sea turtle climbs up on the beach, and she digs a hole, and she lays their eggs in the hole. And then as she lays the eggs, she kicks the sand in and keeps laying more eggs and keeps kicking sand in until finally she's done and she's filled the hole in. Well, the eggs that are buried really deep are cold because they're not as close to the surface. The sand isn't as warm, and those eggs are all female. The eggs that are in the middle, that are halfway between the surface and the cold layer where this ocean water keeps you cool. Those eggs are mixed male and female. And the eggs on the very surface that are closest to the surface and getting the heat from the sun and the sand, those eggs become male. And so the augmentation of the cell is determined by temperature and by the type of sperm. The sperm carries the DNA strand, and so that DNA strand becomes like a seed. It gets divided and multiplied, and that DNA gives direction to the new cells when they're born. Elements follow the same protocol, but it happens deep in the belly of the earth and we don't see it. Alchemy is not meant to be a get-rich-quick scheme or even a get-rich scheme at all. And the fixation of gold in regards to alchemy has tainted the whole understanding of the work itself altogether, and it's really disappointing, actually, because understanding the atom is a scientific breakthrough that apparently humankind achieved many millennia ago in a culture, a civilization that existed so long ago that we don't even know that they existed anymore, except for the fact that this incredible science has been passed down through the generations and managed to survive in spite of all of the selfish and greedy humans in the world. Our scientific community is just barely beginning to understand or even comprehend what's going on with the atom. We're just getting our first proper pictures of the atom. And you look at that picture of the atom, and then you look at the drawings the alchemists made of the wheel. And you look at the rose windows in the Cathedral Notre Dame, and they are the same as the newest picture of the atom that we have today. And those designs were made thousands of years ago. And so we are just now finally coming around as a society, as a whole, humankind. We are finally coming back around to a better understanding of nature, and we are still a long way from achieving the place that our ancestors had. But they left us with this incredible composition, this symphony in elements. And they were so careful in how they shared it that it's really an incredible divine thing when it begins to be opened to you. And I just want to encourage anybody that does have an interest in metallurgical alchemy to keep searching, because there's something there. And just because everybody else believes that it's pseudoscience and not real doesn't mean that they know everything. And maybe there's some things out there that haven't been understood by the mass of humanity today, but they have been understood by the few throughout the ages. I hope that you have a wonderful day, evening, night, wherever you are, and may you be blessed, and don't give up the journey.